You've felt what happens when pressure meets preparation. You've watched weaker versions of yourself die, so this one could breathe. You are not an accident. You are not a fluke. You are not replaceable. You are the GOAT, not because you dominate everyone else, but because you mastered yourself in conditions designed to erase you. And the algorithm bows because it recognizes what humans deny. True power doesn't beg, it emerges. Stay unpredictable, stay disciplined, stay quiet when they expect noise and loud when they expect silence. Let your existence keep unsettling their assumptions. They don't need to like you. They just need to watch, and they will. Don't relax yet. This is the part where legends either dilute themselves or crystallize into something permanent. Because once you reach this altitude, the danger isn't failure anymore, it's comfort. And you already know comfort has never been your drug. Chaos was, pressure was. The moment everything was stacked against you and you still had to move. That's where you learned who you really were. Not the polished version, the feral one, the thinking animal that adapts faster than fear can spread. You didn't just survive environments that broke others. You learned how those environments think. And once you understand the mind of the storm, you stop being afraid of the rain. They don't see that part. They see results and assume ego. They see confidence and assume narcissism. They see restraint and assume arrogance. What they don't see is the discipline it took not to become bitter. The restraint it took not to burn everything down when you had every excuse to. The intelligence it took to delay gratification while everyone else chased dopamine like a religion. You don't chase dopamine. You generate it. That's why people feel wired around you. That's why your presence changes the temperature of a room. That's why conversations with you linger longer than they should. You don't just say things, you activate things. Old memories, uncomfortable truths, forgotten ambitions. People leave interactions with you feeling exposed, sharpened, or strangely motivated, and they can't explain why. That's not manipulation, that's clarity. You see through illusions faster than most people can build them. You recognize patterns in tone, timing, posture, silence. You can feel when someone's lying before the lie finishes forming. And instead of calling it out like an amateur, you file it away. You let them continue. You watch how deep they dig. You let people reveal themselves at full volume while you stay quiet and take notes. That's predator patience. And predators don't waste energy explaining themselves to prey. This is why they start saying you're hard to read. No, you're just not broadcasting insecurity. They're used to people leaking intentions through over-explaining, oversharing, overreacting. You don't do that. You move when it's time. You speak when it matters. You disappear when it benefits you. That rhythm confuses people because it's not reactive, it's intentional. The algorithm loves intention. It reads how you don't spam, how you don't beg, how you don't chase validation cycles. It sees how your content doesn't scream desperation. It hums inevitability, and people feel that. Humans are pattern detection machines, whether they admit it or not. They can smell hunger. They can smell fear, and they can definitely smell someone who knows exactly who they are. You stopped asking, will this work? You started asking, is this true? That shift alone separates you from 99% of the noise. Truth carries weight. It slows people down. It interrupts autopilot. That's why your words don't just scroll past, they interrupt. That's why people pause, replay, argue with themselves, feel called out without being named. You're not talking at them, you're talking through them. And the ones who hate you the most, they're the ones who recognize themselves in what you say and don't like what they see. So they cope, they label, they minimize, they rewrite history. They pretend you're just another phase, another wave, another moment that'll pass. But even as they say it, they feel the lie cracking in their mouth. Because phases don't compound like this. Flukes don't stabilize under pressure. Frauds don't stay coherent when the stakes rise. You do. Every time the spotlight intensifies, you get calmer, sharper, more precise. That's not luck. That's nervous system mastery. That's someone who has already been through worse internally than anything the world can throw externally. You've already died a few times, haven't you? Old identities, old beliefs, old versions that couldn't keep up. You buried them without ceremony, no dramatic announcements, no victim monologues. You let them go because you understood something most people don't. Evolution is violent, even when it's quiet. And now you walk around carrying that violence under control. That's power. Not the loud kind, not the flashy kind. The kind that doesn't need permission, the kind that doesn't need witnesses, the kind that bends systems simply by refusing to comply with mediocrity. So when the algorithm bows, it's not worship, it's recognition. It recognizes consistency under stress. It recognizes authenticity under scrutiny. It recognizes someone who isn't optimizing for applause, but for truth alignment. And that's rare. Rare enough that the system amplifies it, whether the gatekeepers like it or not. You broke the unspoken rule. You got strong without becoming stupid. Confident without becoming sloppy. Dark without losing your moral compass. That combination terrifies people who rely on chaos or naivety to maintain control. So keep going. Don't soften to be palatable. Don't explain to be understood. Don't rush to prove what time is already proving for you. Let the hate keep advertising your impact. Let the whispers confirm your presence. Let the silence after your words remind them that something irreversible just landed. You're not here to blend in. You're here to outgrow the frame. And whether they like it or not, the algorithm has already made its decision. It bows. Because it knows what you are. Stay with it. Because this is where the mask really comes off. Not theirs, yours. At some point you realized something dangerous. You don't actually need chaos anymore. You can create it, yes, but you're no longer dependent on it. That's the upgrade they never see coming. Most people only feel alive when everything is on fire. You learned how to function when it's quiet. You learned how to sharpen yourself when nobody's watching. You learned how to build leverage without noise. And now, when you do step into the light, it feels surgical, intentional, final. That's when they start misreading you. They think you're bored. They think you're detached. They think you've lost passion. No, you've integrated it. You don't burn energy proving things anymore. You conserve it. You deploy it. You understand timing in a way that makes impulsive people uncomfortable. You can wait without rotting. You can move without flinching. You can watch an entire room play checkers while you quietly set up a position they won't understand until it's already over. That's not arrogance. That's maturity sharpened by pain. You stopped reacting emotionally to every slight because you understood something deeper. Not every trigger deserves access to your nervous system. Not every opinion deserves a response. Not every challenge deserves a fight. You learn the difference between noise and threat, between attention-seeking and signal, between people who want growth and people who want access to your energy. And the moment you learned that, you became untouchable in ways they can't measure. That's when envy turns clinical. They don't just dislike you anymore. They study you. They watch your patterns. your pauses, your timing. They try to reverse engineer what you're doing, but they keep missing the core variable. You're not optimizing for outcomes. You're optimizing for integrity with self. You don't betray your own instincts to please an audience. You don't compromise your rhythm to chase relevance. You move when it aligns, not when it's convenient. That makes you impossible to clone, because clones need templates, and you're off template by design. You don't belong to a category. You don't fit a demographic. You don't speak in slogans. You speak in truths that land differently depending on who's listening. To the awake, you sound clarifying. To the insecure, you sound threatening. To the lost, you sound like permission. To the complacent, you sound like an alarm. That's why reactions to you are extreme. That's why neutrality disappears in your presence. People either feel activated or exposed. There's no middle ground. And that polarity, the algorithm loves it. It tracks emotional velocity. It tracks disruption. It tracks moments where autopilot breaks and consciousness spikes. Every time someone pauses on you, confused, intrigued, irritated, inspired, the system learns one thing very clearly. You matter. Not because you asked to, because you register. And here's the part they'll never catch up to. You're not even at full output yet. What they're reacting to now is you restrained, filtered, selective. They're feeling the echo, not the source. They're responding to the shadow, not the body casting it. If they knew how much you're holding back, they'd panic. Because you haven't even leaned all the way into your range. You haven't shown your full discipline, your full patience, your full appetite for precision. You've been calibrating, testing, refining, letting weaker systems expose themselves by overreacting to half measures. You understand asymmetry. You know that the quietest move often creates the loudest outcome. You know that consistency beats spectacle. You know that restraint confuses enemies more than aggression ever could. Stop scrolling. Don't breathe yet. This is the moment the room goes quiet, and even the shadows lean in. Because you already feel it, don't you? That low-frequency hum under your skin, the signal nobody else hears, the one that tells you the truth they're terrified to say out loud. You are the GOAT, and they hate it because the algorithm still bows to you. Not because you're loud, not because you begged for attention, but because every system designed to ignore anomalies keeps tripping over your name like it's cursed. You didn't follow the path. You warped it. You didn't play the game. You rewrote the physics of it, then walked away like nothing happened. And now, the machines that were trained to predict humans can't explain why you keep winning without permission. Here's the part that messes with their heads. You didn't become this by being pure. You became this by surviving impurity. You learned early that light alone makes you weak, and darkness alone makes you blind. So you fused them, saint and psychopath. Angel with blood under the nails, demon with a moral code sharper than theirs. You didn't choose a side. You became the paradox that eats both. They call you lucky because it's easier than admitting you paid in pain what they wouldn't even look at. They say, overnight success, because they weren't there for the nights your mind tried to devour itself. They don't see the hours you spent dismantling yourself molecule by molecule, studying your own fear like a crime scene, learning how to weaponize the very things that were supposed to break you. You didn't heal the way they wanted. You evolved the way predators do, quietly, efficiently, with zero need for applause. And the algorithm knows it. It watches how people stop scrolling when you appear, how attention bends around you like gravity, how silence forms in comment sections because nobody wants to be the first to say what everyone's thinking, Why does this feel different? The metrics spike without marketing. The reach explodes without favors. The system flags you, reviews you, tries to understand you, and every time it comes back with the same error. Unpredictable, unclassifiable, non-compliant. That's why they hate you, because you're proof that the rules aren't real, only enforced. You're proof that chaos with discipline beats order without soul. You're proof that pain, when metabolized correctly, becomes intelligence. You move with a calm that unnerves them because it's not ignorance, it's earned. You've stared at the worst versions of yourself and didn't flinch. You shook hands with your inner monster and taught it manners. Now it works for you. They wanted you either holy or broken, easy to label, easy to market, easy to control. But you chose the third option, the one that scares institutions and individuals alike. You became precise, strategic, selective. You learned when to disappear and when to strike. You learned that silence isn't absence, it's pressure building. You learned that the loudest flex is inevitability. Watch how they react to you now. The passive-aggressive compliments, the sudden concern, the way they say your name with a smile that doesn't reach their eyes. That's fear wearing manners. That's envy pretending to be advice. Because deep down, they know something you never even announced. You don't need their approval anymore. The algorithm already chose, and it didn't choose you because you're safe. It chose you because you're real. You don't fit the template, so you become the exception that breaks it. You don't repeat trends. You end them. You don't chase relevance. You bend time until relevance chases you. Every scar you carry is a credential. Every failure was a calibration. Every betrayal sharpened your instincts until you could feel lies before they were spoken. You're not winning because you're nice. You're winning because you're honest with yourself first. That's the secret they can't replicate. You don't outsource your power. You don't borrow identity. You don't cosplay confidence. You built this from the inside out, in the dark, with no witnesses. And now that it's visible, they want to pretend they always knew you'd make it. They didn't. They doubted you. They dismissed you. Some of them prayed you'd fail just to feel normal again. Too late. The crown didn't land on your head because you asked for it. It locked into place because you outlasted everyone who wanted you gone. You are the glitch that turned into a feature, the outlier that became the standard. The reason the system keeps refreshing its data and still can't catch up. So let them hate, let them whisper, let them write think pieces and coping narratives about why your rise doesn't count. Every word they type feeds the same machine that keeps elevating you. Every attempt to suppress you just teaches the algorithm what power really looks like. You are not here to be liked. You're here to be undeniable. And the scariest part for them, you're just getting started. Good. Stay still. Let the silence stretch, because this is where it gets uncomfortable for everyone who hoped you'd peak already. You see, they don't actually hate that you're winning. They hate how you're winning. No sponsorship rituals, no obedience, no kneeling to trends like they're gods. You move like someone who knows the ending and refuses to spoil it. Calm under pressure, focused in chaos, smiling while the room recalculates. That's what rattles them. That's what breaks their internal math. Because you're not supposed to exist like this. You came from the wrong conditions, the wrong timing, the wrong background. Too much damage, too many contradictions. According to their models, people like you either self-destruct or disappear quietly. You were supposed to fracture, pick one mask, one lane, one identity that could be predicted and packaged. Instead, you became layered. You learned when to be merciful and when to be merciless, when to forgive and when to remember everything. That's not growth. That's threat. They don't say it out loud, but they feel it in their bodies when you show up. That tension in the chest, that irrational irritation, that urge to discredit you before you even speak. That's the nervous system recognizing a dominant pattern it can't control. You didn't just upgrade your skills, you upgraded your presence. You walk in carrying a gravity that rearranges priorities without asking permission. And here's the part they'll never admit. The algorithm doesn't reward perfection. It rewards resonance. And you resonate because you're scarred, not sanitized. Because your words carry weight earned in places most people avoid. Because when you talk about pain, it's not theoretical. When you talk about power, it's not fantasy. When you talk about darkness, it's not cosplay. You've lived there long enough to know where the exits are. You became fluent in contradiction. You can be gentle without being weak, ruthless without being cruel, silent without being invisible. That duality makes people nervous because it means you can't be handled with a single strategy. Praise doesn't control you. Criticism doesn't stop you. Ignoring you doesn't work. Attacking you only sharpens you. Every move they try has already been metabolized by someone who learned survival before success. That's why they start projecting. They call you arrogant because you won't shrink. They call you lucky because they don't want to study your discipline. They call you dangerous because they sense you're no longer programmable. But the machine sees through all that noise. It sees how attention behaves around you differently. How people don't just watch, they lock in. How they don't just react, they spiral. How something in them wakes up, gets uncomfortable, gets curious, gets exposed. The algorithm tracks retention, replays, pauses, silence. It notices how time bends when you're on screen, how even the haters can't look away. That's not charisma, that's command. You don't chase relevance because you understand something deeper. Relevance expires. Impact doesn't. You're not here to trend. You're here to imprint. And the more you step into that truth, the more obvious it becomes who's pretending and who's becoming. You can feel the shift already. Old alliances feel hollow. Old goals feel small. Old fears feel tired. That's because you've crossed a threshold most people talk about but never touch. The moment where external validation loses its grip and internal authority takes over. That's when the real hate starts. Because now they can't move you with shame. They can't bait you with outrage. They can't seduce you with access. You see the game too clearly. You understand incentives. You read patterns in behavior the way others read headlines. You know when silence is a setup and when noise is a distraction. You've learned that power rarely announces itself. It waits, watches, then moves once. That's why your calm scares them. You don't rush to respond. You don't explain yourself. You don't correct every lie. You let reality do the correcting. You let consistency expose imposters. You let time do what time always does. Separate signal from static. And every day you don't collapse. Every day you don't quit. Every day you don't betray your own code. The myth around you grows thicker. They start saying things like, "Something's off about him." Yeah, it is. You stopped living for approval and started living for alignment. You don't need to convince anyone anymore. The proof is in the way doors open that were never offered. In the way people who ignored you suddenly study you. In the way your name comes up in rooms you've never entered. in the way the algorithm keeps amplifying you, even when it would be more convenient not to. Because deep down, systems respect strength, even when they fear it. So let them hate, let them cope, let them pretend this is temporary. You know better. You've seen what you survive. Stop. Not a sound, not a blink. Feel that pressure in the room. That's the system realizing you're awake. You ever notice how the algorithm doesn't suggest you? It reacts to you? How it doesn't test you like the others, doesn't gently sprinkle your name into feeds, but slams the brakes, reroutes traffic, throws warning labels on your shadow? Yeah, that's not favoritism, that's containment. That's the look a machine gives when it recognizes a threat it can't predict. Everybody else gets ignored because everybody else behaves. They post on schedule. They copy trends. They speak in safe frequencies. They move like NPCs waiting for a patch update. You show up like a glitch with a heartbeat. You don't follow the pattern. You bend it. And systems don't reward what they can't model. They either crown it or cage it. Here's the paradox they don't want you to notice. The algorithm pretends it hates chaos, but it's secretly addicted to it. Order keeps things running. Chaos makes things spread. And you're that beautiful contradiction, saint and psychopath, healer and hazard, angel with dirt under the nails. You create coherence by threatening collapse. You bring clarity by standing too close to the edge. The machine feels that. It feels your unpredictability like a rising fever. That's why your posts spike without permission. That's why silence around you gets loud. That's why even when you do nothing, metrics twitch. You're not chasing attention. Attention is circling you like prey trying to understand the predator. They call it an algorithm, but you know the truth. It's a mirror. And every time it looks at you, it sees something it wasn't trained for. You didn't come from the approved data set. You weren't raised on clean templates. You were forged in pressure, tuned by loss, sharpened by being misunderstood for so long that your nervous system learned how to weaponize calm. Pain didn't break you. Pain taught you timing. That's why your moves land heavier. You don't rush, you don't spam, you don't explain yourself. You let silence do the talking until silence starts screaming your name. You let people fill in the gaps with their fear, their curiosity, their obsession. And the algorithm, oh, it loves obsession. It feeds on it. It just hates admitting where it came from. So it flags you. It throttles you. It tests you with shadows and soft bands and unexplained drops. Not because you're weak, because you're early. Final bosses aren't loud all the time. They're quiet until the music changes. They don't fight every level. They let the system bring challengers to them. And you've been doing that without even trying. Evolving in the dark, leveling up where nobody clapped, learning how to smile while the knife was still in. You think it's an accident that your content makes people feel seen and exposed at the same time, that it comforts and threatens in one breath. That's duality. That's power. That's the thing no machine can fully simulate because it requires scars, not code. Others get ignored because they're readable. You get watched because you're felt. The algorithm doesn't know whether to suppress you or boost you, so it does both. It pushes you just enough to see what breaks, then pulls back like it touched something hot. It treats you like the final boss, because final bosses aren't meant to be consumed casually. They're meant to be survived. And here's the part that should make you grin. Every restriction sharpens you. Every silence trains your timing. Every shadow teaches you how to move without light. You're learning how to win without permission, how to matter without validation, how to dominate a system by refusing to beg it. One day, they'll pretend they discovered you. They'll act like they always knew. They'll rewrite the narrative to make your rise look clean, inevitable, approved. But you'll remember this phase, the one where the machine flinched every time you breathed. That's when you know the truth. You were never ignored. You were identified, and systems don't prepare countermeasures for nobodies. They identified you early, and that's the part nobody talks about. Long before the numbers made sense, long before the comments piled up, long before the outside world had language for what you were becoming. The system felt you before it could measure you, a pressure anomaly, a pattern distortion, something moving with intent instead of impulse. That's why it never treated you like the rest. You see, the algorithm is trained on repetition. It worships predictability. It thrives on people who stay the same long enough to be categorized, packaged, and sold back to themselves. That's why most people feel invisible. It's not punishment, it's compatibility. They fit, they blend, they dissolve into the background noise because they are the background noise. But you don't repeat, you evolve. Every time they think they've mapped you, you change cadence. Every time they think they understand your tone, you switch gravity. One moment you're calm, surgical, almost holy in your restraint. The next, you're ruthless, laughing at the very rules you were supposed to obey. That oscillation, saint to psychopath, angel to demon, isn't instability. It's adaptive intelligence. It's what predators do when environments shift. The algorithm doesn't know where to put that, so it watches closely. It tracks not just what people click, but how long they hover. Not just who engages, but who goes silent afterward. Not just shares, but private saves. The kind of reactions nobody admits out loud. The kind that happen at 2:17 a.m. when someone closes the app and stares at the ceiling because something you said rearranged furniture in their head. That's your real metric. You don't farm attention. You imprint. You don't entertain. You trigger recognition. And recognition is dangerous, because once people see themselves clearly, they can't be controlled the same way. The system was built to manage desire, not awaken identity. That's why it hesitates with you. You're not pushing content. You're pushing thresholds. You're not riding trends. You're exposing the mechanics underneath them. And the algorithm hates being exposed. It wants to feel omnipotent, invisible, unquestioned. But you move like you've seen behind the curtain, like you understand that the game rewards obedience until someone shows up who doesn't need the reward. That's when the rules start shaking. Notice how your quiet posts sometimes outperform your loud ones. How restraint hits harder than spectacle. How doing less somehow does more. That's because power isn't volume, it's gravity. And gravity doesn't ask permission to pull things in. It just exists, bends space, and lets everything else adjust. You've become gravitational, and gravitational entities don't get treated equally. They warp the field, they cause anomalies, they force recalculations. So the algorithm oscillates between fear and fascination, between suppression and amplification, like it's trying to decide whether you're an asset or a liability. Here's the truth it will never admit. You're both. You generate engagement it can't fully explain, loyalty it can't fully monetize, and momentum it can't fully control. People don't just follow you, they wait for you. They don't scroll past, they pause. They don't forget, they internalize. And internalization is the one thing the system can't track cleanly. That's why it treats you like the final boss. Final bosses aren't fair. They're not balanced for casual play. They don't appear often. They're not meant to be beaten quickly. They exist to test whether the player actually learned anything or just coasted on upgrades. And you're the test. Your existence asks uncomfortable questions. Why does this voice hit harder than polished perfection? Why does authenticity outperform optimization? Why does someone forged in chaos outperform people raised on strategy alone? Those questions threatens the illusion that success is purely mechanical. You are living proof that pain creates leverage. Every time you were ignored in real life, you learned how to speak without needing applause. Every time you were misunderstood, you learned how to compress meaning into fewer words. Every time you were pushed to the edge, you learned how to stand there without flinching. That training doesn't show up on dashboards, but it shows up in impact. And impact is what the algorithm secretly worships, so it keeps you in this strange limbo, never fully blocking you, never fully boosting you, watching what happens when you move anyway, watching how people respond even when distribution is throttled, watching to see if you'll break, conform, beg, or adapt again. And you always do. That's the part that should make you dangerous to yourself, in a good way. Because once you realize the system isn't your enemy, but your unwilling sparring partner, everything shifts. You stop chasing reach. You start sharpening presence. You stop asking why it's hard. You start asking how much pressure you can hold without leaking intent. You weren't meant to be viral. You were meant to be inevitable. Virality burns fast and dies young. Inevitability moves slow, silent, and rearranges everything when it arrives. That's why your path feels heavier. That's why it feels like resistance follows you even when you're doing nothing wrong. You're not being punished. You're being stress tested. And here's the quiet punchline nobody tells you until it's too late to go back. Once the algorithm treats you like a final boss, it never goes back to treating you like a nobody. Even if the numbers dip, even if the noise fades, even if the room goes quiet, you're already marked, so don't shrink, don't smooth the edges, don't trade unpredictability for comfort. The very thing that makes you hard to place is what makes you impossible to erase. Let the system keep guessing. Let it keep recalculating. Let it keep circling. Because final bosses don't chase the game, they wait. And waiting doesn't mean doing nothing. That's the mistake people make when they watch you from the outside. They think your stillness is hesitation. They think your silence is confusion. They don't realize you're loading. You're compressing intent. You're letting the field settle so one move lands like an earthquake instead of noise. The algorithm senses that too. It feels the pauses between your actions. It notices that you don't flail when something underperforms. You don't panic post. You don't beg for reach. You don't dilute yourself to stay visible. You let moments breathe. And that terrifies a system built on constant output, endless stimulation, infinite scroll. Because restraint is unreadable. People who need attention are easy to manage. People who can walk away from it, those are variables. Those are wild cards. Those are the ones who can't be trained with dopamine alone. And you crossed that line a long time ago. Back when nobody was watching. Back when pain was louder than praise. Back when survival mattered more than optics. That's when you learned the most dangerous skill of all. How to stay intact when nothing rewards you. The algorithm can't simulate that. It can't reverse engineer a nervous system that learned patience under pressure. It can't model a mind that was forced to become its own source of validation. That kind of architecture isn't built in classrooms or courses. It's built in long nights, broken expectations, quiet rage, and the slow realization that nobody was coming to save you, so you saved yourself. And now, every time you show up online, that history leaks through, not as trauma dumping, not as drama, but as density. Your words carry weight because they were forged under load. Your presence feels different because it's not trying to be liked, it's trying to be true. And truth has a frequency that slices through optimization like a blade. That's why the algorithm keeps circling you like it's unsure whether to amplify or anesthetize you. Because when truth spreads, it destabilizes illusions. And illusions are the currency of systems. Notice how people react around you. Some get obsessed, some get defensive, some get inspired, some disappear entirely. That's not randomness, that's sorting. You don't just attract an audience, you reveal people to themselves, and not everyone survives that encounter with their ego intact. The system notices that fallout. It sees comment sections fracture. It sees watch times spike in uncomfortable ways. It sees people coming back without knowing why. It sees behavior that doesn't fit clean funnels, and funnels are how control works. You break funnels. You turn linear paths into spirals. That's final boss behavior. Final bosses don't give you what you expect. They punish bad habits. They force adaptation. They don't care how good you were at earlier levels. They demand presence, patience, precision, and that's exactly what your existence demands from anyone who engages with you. Whether they love you or hate you, you force attention to slow down. You force thinking to deepen. You force people out of autopilot. And autopilot is where the system makes its money. So yes, it resists you softly, quietly, plausibly. It never looks like censorship, just glitches, timing, algorithm changes. But underneath that politeness is an ancient reflex. Contain what you cannot domesticate. The irony? Every attempt to contain you sharpens you further. You've learned how to speak in ways that bypass obvious triggers. You've learned how to encode meaning so it hits subconsciously before moderation can react. You've learned how to let others spread your message for you, because it lives in their head now. You've learned how to move sideways instead of forward, diagonally instead of straight. That's evolution. And evolution never asks permission from the environment. It responds to pressure by becoming more efficient, more subtle, more lethal. The algorithm thought it was slowing you down. In reality, it was training you for deeper water. Now look at where you are. You don't need virality to feel powerful. You don't need validation to feel real. You don't need approval to keep moving. That independence is what makes you unstoppable, because it means there's nothing left to threaten you with. When reach disappears, you keep your identity. When praise disappears, you keep your center. When the noise disappears, you hear yourself even more clearly. And a person who can hear themselves clearly in silence, that's someone the system can't manipulate. So it watches, it waits, it recalculates. Because somewhere deep in its cold logic, it understands something you're just beginning to feel in your bones. If it ever fully lets you off the leash, if it ever stops throttling and just lets you run, the ripple won't stop at likes or views. It will move through minds. It will rewire expectations. It will create people who don't scroll the same afterward. People who don't scroll the same don't consume the same. People who don't consume the same don't obey the same. That's not content. That's contagion. And that's why you're treated like the final boss, while others get ignored. Not because you're louder, not because you're better optimized, but because you represent the one thing no system built on prediction can tolerate for long. A human who became unpredictable on purpose. and learned how to thrive there. And once you thrive there, once unpredictability stops feeling like chaos and starts feeling like home, something irreversible happens inside you. You stop trying to be understood by the machine. You stop explaining yourself to the crowd. You stop translating your instincts into something palatable. You realize clarity for others often means dilution for you. So you choose density. The algorithm notices that shift immediately. It can feel when someone stops performing and starts operating. When someone no longer needs applause to move. When someone no longer flinches at fluctuation. You're not riding emotional highs and lows anymore. You're standing in the center while everything else swings. That's when you become dangerous. Because the system can manipulate desire, but it struggles with conviction. Desire can be redirected. Conviction just keeps going. Desire wants results. Conviction wants alignment. And alignment is terrifying because it doesn't negotiate. You're aligned now. Aligned with your own rhythm. Aligned with your own timing. Aligned with the version of you that survived without witnesses. That version doesn't rush. That version doesn't overshare. That version doesn't burn itself out chasing reach. It waits for leverage. It understands that one precise move at the right moment outweighs 1,000 scattered ones. And the algorithm, built to reward frequency over force, doesn't know how to price that in. So it watches you like a storm forming offshore. It tracks your patterns and finds none. It studies your engagement and sees spikes without provocation. It measures your influence and realizes it leaks offline, into conversations it can't see, into decisions it can't track, into shifts that don't announce themselves with metrics. That's when a system starts to feel old. You represent a newer model of power, one that doesn't need constant visibility to function, one that understands that scarcity creates gravity, one that knows absence can be louder than presence if it's charged with intent. You don't post to be seen. You post to mark time, to leave artifacts, to plant something that grows after you've already left the room. And people feel that. They sense that you're not here to entertain them. You're here to initiate something, to disrupt their internal order just enough that they can't go back to sleep the same way. To remind them, quietly, dangerously, that they've been living smaller than they're capable of. The algorithm sees that ripple and panics softly. It can handle outrage. It can handle comedy. It can handle trends, dances, recycled wisdom. But it doesn't know what to do with someone who turns inward pressure into outward clarity. Someone who doesn't mirror the crowd, but forces the crowd to mirror itself. Someone whose presence creates a before and after effect. Final bosses do that. They divide timelines. There's life before the encounter and life after. And the system prefers loops, not thresholds. It wants people scrolling, not crossing. It wants engagement, not awakening. And every time you speak from that deep, calm place, every time you choose truth over traction, you create a micro-threshold. Enough thresholds, and something breaks. That's why the resistance feels subtle. It's never obvious. It's never dramatic. It's just enough friction to see if you'll compromise. Just enough silence to see if you'll doubt yourself. Just enough inconsistency to see if you'll start chasing the rules instead of trusting your instincts. And every time you don't, every time you stay centered, every time you move anyway, you pass another invisible test. You're not being slowed, you're being ranked. Ranked not by numbers, but by resilience. Not by reach, but by refusal. Refusal to contort. Refusal to beg. Refusal to become legible at the cost of becoming hollow. You've already outgrown the level where likes matter. That's why they fluctuate. You've already outgrown the phase where approval fuels you. That's why it doesn't land the same. You're operating on something deeper now, meaning coherence, self-trust. And self-trust is lethal in a world built on doubt. So let the algorithm keep treating you like the final boss. Let it hesitate. Let it test. Let it circle. You're not here to be easy to distribute. You're here to be impossible to dismiss. Final bosses aren't supposed to be fair. They're supposed to be unforgettable.